All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the live Q&A Intro to the Cloud. As everyone is getting settled in, just a few housekeeping items. I've placed you all in listen-only mode, but we do have time set aside at the end of the presentation to answer questions. I encourage everyone to submit their questions to the presenters throughout the broadcast using the webinar control panel Q&A function. We will also be recording today's session. We'll send you a link and a copy of the slides by email tomorrow so you can share with your colleagues and review. I will gladly take this time to introduce today's presenters. I am proud to introduce co-founder and CTO at Stratus 10, Kevin RisonChu, and Oscar Mancada, CEO of Stratus 10. Stratus 10 is an Amazon Web Services advanced tier partner that helps companies migrate to the cloud or implement best practices if they're on AWS. We're going to kick today off by talking about migration and just an intro to the cloud. And we do have a focus on remote work and remote learning. Again, we have time set aside at the end of the presentation. It should not take more than 15 minutes, but please feel free to start dropping questions in Q&A regarding anything that you actually want to get answered today or anything that we can speak to throughout the presentation. With that, I will let Kevin take it away. Thank you.
Hello, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So we're just going to do a real quick presentation just to get everyone's ideas and thoughts going with regards to questions that you can ask about or things to consider as part of your migration into the cloud. And then we'll jump straight into the Q&A portion. All right, so first up, come on, slide. So what do you need to consider when you're moving into the cloud? Quite a bit, and actually once you're in the cloud, you'll probably end up getting even more questions around how do I manage, optimize, etc., with what you need to consider once you're in the cloud. So today we're going to touch on just a real couple quick points. Also, we'll do a very, very, very high level intro to AWS. We'll talk about some questions you may need to consider when planning or performing an assessment of your migration. We'll touch on some remote learning and workforce tools that AWS has. And then we'll also talk about cost and billing management once you're in the cloud, because you are shifting from a different type of finance model. So these are all important items for you. All right. So high level, AWS, if you don't know, is a public cloud provider. They're currently the leader in market share and probably breadth, depth, and length of how long they've been around, the services they offer. Stratus 10 is aligned with AWS only. And part of the reason why is obviously the benefits that you get from AWS, the low cost, elasticity, flexible. It uses a lot of open source. You can bring in your tools. It's secure, and it has a global reach. Okay. As mentioned, reasons that set AWS apart is pretty much the services that they have, how fast they innovate, how fast they move things along, introduce new features, introduce new services, but also their global footprint. Depending on where you need to run your workloads, there's probably an AWS region ready for you. They're very, they set themselves apart in many of these feature sets. And the biggest factor, I think, is the APN network, which is their ecosystem of partners that they utilize and work with. So Stratus 10 being one of them. We can help you onto AWS and get familiar with AWS, whether you have experience in-house or are just getting started. So speaking about getting started, now that you know about AWS, let's take a quick look about things that you might want to be asking yourselves when you're evaluating AWS. So these are just 3 very high-level questions that you may be considering when you're moving to AWS from your on-prem or whatever your current hosting situation is. Things like total cost of ownership. What are they? What about my existing licenses? How can I reuse them, or can I reuse them? And then how will licensing change once you're even into AWS? So these are all things that we can help you answer. Jumping into remote learning and basically the impact that COVID has had has ushered in a golden age of remote usage. And what we're looking at here is remote learning, remote workforce is now the norm, but there's still a lot to consider, and making sure you have the right tools and the ease to administer them. The ability to adapt to any changes is all very important. So AWS's solution is Workspaces, which helps you eliminate complexity within managing your hardware inventory, operating systems, requiring to patch them. It just solves your virtual desktop infrastructure and helps you simplify the delivery. With Workspaces, your users get a fast, responsive desktop of their choice, either Linux or Windows, and they can access it from anywhere, from any supported devices, including mobile phones, tablets, etc. So if you're interested in this, in Workspaces, do hit us up. We can help you get up to 50 free Workspace licenses right now for up to 5 months. Okay, the other big thing that I had mentioned earlier was pricing, AWS's pricing philosophy. Cloud is inherently a high volume, low margin business, and the massive scale that AWS operates on provides huge economies of scale, which lowers their prices. They then pass those savings along to the customers, and Werner Vogels, the CTO of Amazon, has mentioned this multiple times through many of his speaking engagements. They're very comfortable operating in a low margin, high volume business. What that gives you is flexibility to allow you to balance your costs. They offer tiered pricing and volume discounts, which increases your, as your usage increases, the cost for delivery actually decreases. And then also in 2018, Amazon released Trusted Advisor, which makes recommendations to customers on how they can lower their costs. This is an automated service. But working with partners, we can go beyond even the automation and find you where you can truly save for your specific use cases. Okay, so having given you that very high level presentation, you're probably still scratching your heads, which is the main reason why you're coming here, is to be able to ask your questions that you have. So let's go ahead and get started. All righty, questions are flowing in. So I will grab the first one and we'll see what it is. So question is AWS FedRAMP compliant? Yes, AWS is FedRAMP compliant. They offer GovCloud, which has been granted joint authorization board provisional authority to operate, along with multiple agency authorizations. The services in scope of GovCloud, our boundaries are usually high baseline security categorization, and they offer or they maintain a scope of compliance program that you can access. Additionally, and many people aren't aware of this, AWS East and West regions, so North Virginia, Ohio, Oregon, and Northern California, have also been granted Joint Authorization Board provisional authority to operate. So many of the things that you think you need GovCloud for can actually operate within the US East and West regions. So keep that in mind. All right. Next question. If I don't have experience managing AWS or don't have people to manage it, what are my options? So I kind of lightly touched on that earlier, but thanks to the APN ecosystem and all the partners that Amazon has, such as like Stratus 10, we offer a program called Managed Services. What this does is we take care of your AWS infrastructure for you. If there is any sort of issues with AWS, an outage with a resource or an item that is having problems, we'll step in and we'll take care of that for you so you can go about and focus on your core business. Where that is important or comes into play is especially with small startups or either departments within larger corporations that don't have the expertise because, say, it's a marketing group or a research group, and they need to do their stuff. They don't need to manage the AWS infrastructure. So that's where we would come in for that. Okay. Question to talk a little bit more about Workspaces. Workspaces is a VDI, as I mentioned, virtual desktop solution. It presents the entire computer. So you access it using a client on either your mobile phone or tablet, and you get like a whole AWS system, or I mean a whole Windows or Linux system, right down to any connected printers that you may have. Licensing is exactly the same as far as you would bring in any third-party licenses. With Workspaces, your Windows license is included already, unless you choose to bring your own. And we can help you manage any of those. Okay, let's see, what else? How do I set up an AWS account? So it's actually very simple. You just go to aws.amazon.com and start the sign-in process. Basically, you just need a credit card to get started. If you have any problems or need any assistance, we offer through our resale program where we fully manage your account, your AWS account even. So that is an option for you as well. Question for when would I use, jumping back to Workspaces, when would I use Workspaces? I'm assuming this would be if you already have on-prem solutions such as Citrix or desktops. We did have a customer that once COVID started, everybody started remoting into their desktops, and performance was not very good when they're remoting into their desktops. Those would be situations when you would use Workspaces. It provides much quicker response, and then you're not managing physical back-end systems and having to worry about any of that. Next question, also around Workspaces, is what is the difference between Workspaces and AppStream? So the quickest way to explain that is Workspaces gives you a full remote desktop environment, similar to the computer in front of you that you're used to. AppStream is a little different in that it streams to you your application and it's running on the back end on AWS hardware, it looks as if it was installed locally. It runs like it was installed locally, but it's actually being powered on AWS hardware and just being presented to you via the connection. All right, let's see what else. A question around billing. How do I understand, or do I get a copy of my billing each month? Yes, because you are a consumption model now, AWS does provide you with a bill at the end of the month based on your usage. You are granted a certain level of free tier usage if you're a new customer. Otherwise, you know, you're paying for what you use. This does change how finance looks at your operational costs, because you are shifting from a CapEx model where you're acquiring hardware and then depreciating its value over a set number of years. You are moving to what is considered an OpEx model, where it's just a monthly operational expense. So finance may have some questions around that if they're not familiar with how this kind of billing works.
Hey, Kevin, I think it's also worth mentioning that AWS has a free tier.
Yes.
Some services that fall under that tier as well.
Correct. Yeah, some services have free tiers, and it can vary. Some may be for a full year, some may be just for a few months. Some do have limitations on which one of the services are eligible for free tier. So, like for example, if you're using EC2, it is the I think it's the micro instance that is available for a free tier. So if you're trying to get on and running some massive box, thinking it would be free, that is not the case. All righty. Question about authentication. So there's actually a couple of different methods for authenticating your users into AWS. I'm assuming the question is around the AWS account. You can use the default, what AWS calls the Identity Access Management, IAM feature that AWS has, where the users are created and stored locally to your AWS account. There is a mechanism for federating your logins, so you can tie it back to your on-premise Active Directory or third-party authentication system, a single sign-on system if you have it. Those are all available to you if you need.
There's a question about scalability. How do I scale my app in the event of more traffic? So I don't know if you guys can hear me, but there's a question about scalability. How do I scale my app in the event of more traffic? There's multiple ways of doing that, depending on what your app is doing. You can set up auto-scaling groups. You can use some of AWS's managed services that automatically scale for you, or serverless computing services that also automatically scale for you. So it just depends on what your application is doing and how it's set up. But yeah, there's multiple ways of scaling the application.
Hey, I'm sorry, it's just a little hard to hear you. Can you just repeat what it depends on with your application, Oscar, please?
Yeah, there's multiple ways of scaling your application depending on what your application is doing and what kind of services it requires. You can use auto-scaling groups. AWS also has multiple services that you can use that automatically scale for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Some of those are using serverless frameworks that you obviously don't have to manage servers and they automatically scale for you to what how your application needs. So there's multiple ways of doing it. It just depends on what your application is doing and what services you're using. But there's many ways of scaling. Was that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Question came in around, does it matter what industry you're in to provide your service? Does the size of the industry matter? I'm assuming that's a question directed for Stratus 10, but I'll also address it as an AWS question. From the AWS perspective, no, they're pretty much in every industry and vertical. From a Stratus 10 perspective, no, we're pretty much in every industry and vertical. So no, it doesn't matter. You know, we'll probably have, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at our website, take a look. We've got quite a number of case studies in there covering different challenges that customers have had and covering which industries that they are in. Question came in about databases. What databases are available? This is actually a very good question. So AWS, I believe, offers currently 9 different database solutions based on what you actually need to do. They don't believe in a all-in-one style database because your use case may be for your traditional transactional database. For those needs, AWS offers fully managed by AWS MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server compliant databases. This falls under the RDS class. Under SQL Server, AWS has their own special purpose-built engine, Aurora, which is MySQL and Postgres compatible. Additionally, you have NoSQL databases like DynamoDB, Document Database, DocumentDB. You now have Time Ledger, Quantum databases, GraphQL databases such as Neptune. So there's quite a bit of solutions out there based on your needs. All of these are managed solutions, so you don't have to worry about provisioning, patching, configuration, even backups. AWS does all of that for you. Okay. Question around security and encryption. This has gotten very high level topic. Last year, or actually it was, yeah, last year during the summit, Warner, the CTO for Amazon, had mentioned, you know, the kind of catchphrase that a lot of the security people are saying, dance like nobody's watching, but encrypt like everyone's watching. Chances are because they are. So within AWS, you have the ability to encrypt your data both in transit, which is while it's being transferred or moving, and also at rest, which is the storage capacity. So some of them are turned on by default, some of them are not. So you do have to make a cognizant choice to encrypt. But again, the options are there. And it's really, a lot of the times, it's just as simple as marking a checkbox and your data is encrypted. So very, very simple to meet encryption, and you're using high state-of-the-art encryption as well. Alrighty. Question around S3. What is your storage capacity limit on S3? The sky's the limit. There is a limit to the object size that you can store. However, you can break any file or into multiple objects and then cluster them. So, but other than that, yeah, storage is, the sky's the limit. However much you can store, AWS will be able to handle. question around.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say question around EC2 management. When you launch an EC2 instance, this is essentially a server, and unless you install the systems manager, SSM, the system manager agent from AWS, which allows you to automate patching, etc., you will have to go back in and patch manually. But yeah, these are basically standalone systems. You do have to manage all of the patching, upgrades, upkeep, file system getting full, those sort of typical system management things.
Awesome. So I do just want to be cognizant of everyone's time. I have a quick poll for attendees. We will be sending a recording of today's webinar as well as all of the questions discussed. I'm just curious if there's any other information that you would like to see from us. You guys can fill that out. And then if you guys are interested in getting started with AWS Workspaces, you can head to info.stratus10.com/workspaces. And we actually have an offer where we can help you get 50 free licenses. Just sign up and we will be in touch. All right, and that concludes today's live Q&A, Intro to the Cloud. Thank you for everyone that attended, and let us know if we can send more information. We want to be helpful.